Hi guys, welcome back to Math 100. Today we are doing 3.2. This is the second class in logic, and there's two things that we're learning today. Number one, what are conditional statements? And number two, what is the converse, inverse, and contrapositive? So here we go. But before we get started, let's do some reviews. Number 1 and 2, construct a truth table for these two statements, compound statements. This is something that you should essentially know how to do. Except for one little thing that you might not be familiar with. We haven't seen yet something with 3 individual letters. Yeah, in each individual letters, those represent the simple statements that make up this compound statement. And if you have 3, that means we're gonna need 8 rows in our what is it called? Truth table. 8 rows in our truth table. So I copied those questions down. Let's break them down one at a time. I'll show you the first one, and then you try out the second one before watching the rest of the video, okay? First, we need a rectangle. Give me a rectangle, please. There we go. Okay, and then this is our truth table for P or Q and S. That means I'm going to need, for my first 3 columns, each individual symbol statement, a P, a Q, and an S. And I know I said there's 8 rows, but let me just break down why there are 8 rows. For each of those simple statements, the P, the Q, and the S, there's 2 options, right? I could have P being true or false. I could have Q being true or false, and I could have S being true or false. So for each of those 2 options, each of the other ones has 2 options. So when P is true or false, Q could also be true or false, and S could also be true or false. So if you look at how many different combinations there are possible of P, Q, and S being true or false, it's 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. 2 because true or false is 2 different options, right? 2 options times 2 options is 8. And in general, if you have n letters, it's 2 to the n, 2 to the n options. 2 to the n options are 2 to the n rows in our truth table. In this particular case, we have 3 letters, P, Q, and S. So 2 to the third equals to 8. 8 options or 8 rows. Let's say rows instead. Rows in our truth table, yeah. Okay, so 2 to n rows. All right, so let's fill out those rows. Give me a moment to first make the thing. So here's P, Q, and S. That's what you start with, right? And now our target is to build this statement first. And to do that, you're going to basically follow the order of operations. So maybe this might be the hardest part of this whole question, is figuring out what to put in that top row over there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just build it following the order of operations for this statement. In this statement, if I look, the order of operations says parentheses should be first. And that's what I'm going to tackle. I'm going to make that P or Q part. Yes, it's going to be the first step, yeah? Okay, once I have P or Q, what's the second step? That would be to take this negation of the S. So second step, negation of the S. Now, if I look back at what I have the P or Q part on the left. I've got the negation S. And so I can just combine those 2 things with an and in between. When you're figuring out what to put on the row, you just want to think you're only going to do 1 step at a time for each column that you make. So P or Q, I have that over here, right? And then the not S, I have that over here. So I'm just combining them with 1 operator at the end, and then that's going to make our whole entire truth table. All right, now, like I said, there's 8 rows. So what are those 8 rows? Let's make the 8 rows first. Okay, not completely even, but we get the picture. Okay, so let me explain a little trick for figuring out how to do the 8 rows with trues and falses. I want every possible combination of trues and falses, right? So the way that you're going to start, since I know there's 8 rows, the first column, this P column, gets half of those filled in with true and half filled in with false. So half true means 4 trues to start, and then the rest of those are going to be false. Now this pattern is going to ensure that I get every possible combination of P's, Q's, and S's being true or false. So that first time I did 4 at a time. The next column, I'm going to do half of that. So it's going to be 2 at a time. 2 trues, followed by 2 falses, followed by 2 trues, followed by 2 falses. Now this beginning of the table is going to become routine. Anytime I have an 8-row table, this is the same way I'm always going to start it. The S is going to be true, false, just alternating. Now, if you look at what we've accomplished right here, we have every single possible combination. Here at the top, we have when they're all true. Here at the bottom, we have when they're all false. And in between, we have all the other options, where P, Q, and S are true or false. Now, let's fill out the rest of the table. The rest is pretty much routine. We're going to start with the P or Q. And remember, I told you guys a little hint for P or Qs. What you're looking for with an OR statement is you're looking for where they're both false, because that's going to be the one time that you are false. So where's P and where's Q? Right here and here. Where are they both false? Down there in the 7th row and down here at the 8th row. So that's going to give you the 2 falses in the P or Q column, and the rest is going to be true. Now to the not S. Not S is actually very simple. Here's my S column. To get the not S column, I'm just going to do the reverse of each of the original S values. So S started off as true in that first row. That means the not S will be the opposite. It's going to be false. And then it was false in the next row. That means not S is going to be the opposite. It's going to be true. And so forth and so forth. What you're going to end up with is false, true, false, true, false, true, because S started off as being true, false, true, false, true, false, right? All right, so now I have my 2 building blocks to build my final statement. If you look here, I've got the P or Q on the left. I've got the not S on the right. And what am I doing for my final column? I'm doing P or Q on the left, not S on the right. And what's connecting them is the AND. So what I'm doing here, I'm going to focus in on this column, the P or Q column, focus in on the not S column, and just combine those 2 columns within AND statement. So let's take that first one as an example. I've got true and false. What is true and false? The result is a false. Next one, I have a true and true. The result is a true. And actually, let me remind you guys that other tip I said. Remember last class I said when you're dealing with an AND in a truth table, what you really want to look for is when you have both sides being true. That happens total of 3 times, right? So those are the times when they're both true. And if they're both true, the end result for an AND is true. Otherwise, it's false, right? So those are the only times it's false. It's true. And the rest of the time, it's going to be false. Okay, and then just like that, we've finished filling in our truth table for number 1. So that was number 1. All right, guys, try number 2. Because these things they're kind of time consuming, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, wait, let me move this guy out. Oops. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on number 2, but I want you guys to just try it first. Okay, let me try that again. It's not letting me select only the truth table. So, I'm just going to erase it because you guys can pause it to look at this table here for number 1. I'm about to erase this and then do number 2. Okay. Oh, you know what? Actually, let me keep my components here. I'm gonna keep my table intact because the start of the table is actually exactly the same. I've got a P, Q, and S again. And so those first 3 columns are going to be exactly the same. And it's these columns that might change. Actually, they are going to change. All right. Let's erase all this too so we don't get distracted. Okay, so right now I'm doing problem number 2. I've already finished problem number 1. Rewind if you want to see the solution for that one. Number 2 says, build this guy, P and not Q or S. Following the order of operations, I will do the parentheses first. But within the parentheses, I first have a not Q. So the not Q is going to be the very first thing to happen right here, not Q. Well, let's use black here. Not Q. Okay, once I have this not Q, what's the next step? It would be to combine it with this and for the parentheses, so I have P and not Q, right? So then I have the left side now built, right, of that final statement. And the right side in regular old S, I already had S. So that means I'm able to complete my last column by writing it all together. That's P and not Q on the left, or S on the right. Let's do this thing. So not Q. Not Q is the reverse of the original Q. The original Q started off as true, true, false, false, true, true, false, false. Which means its reverse is going to be false, false, true, true. False, false, true, true. Oops. Like that. Okay, what about P and not Q then? So P not Q, to do that one, to solve that one, I'm looking here at the P column. Looking at the not Q column. Just focusing on those two, focusing on those two columns, connecting them with the and. Remember, and is only true when they're both true. So looking at my P and Q, P and not Q column, here P is true and here not Q is also true. And those are the only times that they match up there. Which means those are the times when P and not Q is true. Those two spots, those two rows. Okay, and every else is false. If you prefer to do it one at a time, you can. Looking at each individual piece one at a time. So true and false makes a false, right? For instance, true and a false makes a false. False and a false makes a false, blah, 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 blah. If you don't want to just do the little trick that I mentioned and only look at where they're both true. Whichever one works. It's just slightly slower, but it's okay. It's not that much slower. Okay, now doing the last statement. Last statement. What do I have here? I've got P and not Q on the left. That's this one. I've got an or in between. I have S. That's this one. So I'm focusing in only on these two columns now. Connecting them with the or. And remember the trick for or is to look for where they're both false this time. Because those are going to give me the only falses. So here they're both false. Let's see where else. Here they're both false, and here they're both false. Okay, so those are the falses. And everywhere else is true. Just to confirm, here's a true. That makes that or statement true. Here's a true. Actually, both are true, which makes the or statement true. Here's a true, which makes the or statement true. Here's a true, makes the or statement true. And there's a true, which makes the or statement true. So this is their completed truth table. Your final result should look something like this. True, false, true, 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 false, true, false. All right. And just like that, we've finished our review. Although it's review, it's kind of like slightly new, yeah. Actually, you know what? Let's do a little more review. And then we'll start the next video with this box over here. Okay. So a little more review. What did we learn last time? We learned 3 operations. The negation. Remember, that's when you flip the truth value, right? You flip actually the entire meaning of the statement. We learned the and operator and the or operator. Ands, remember, are true if they're both true on the left and right. Ors are true if one or the other is true on the left or right. All right, guys, just like that, we're done with the review, first video. I'll see you in the next one.